that like immediately gives you more familiarity, more flaws. It ramps up the conflict a little bit more because it raises the stakes. Because now we know there's a consequence to this secret coming out about this character, or somebody else finding out about this thing that they don't want anybody to know.
We're sisters, best friends, and authors on a mission to help you stoke your creative fire and live the life of your dreams. We believe that purpose fuels passion and that creativity is your secret weapon for mass construction. There's never been a better time to bless the world with your dream realized. You're listening to The Kate and Abbie Show.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of The Kate and Abbie Show. Today we are talking about 5 easy, simple ways to make your characters more flawed and therefore more lovable, more human and real. We've talked a lot about flawed characters on this channel and in the podcast, and flawed characters are something that is sometimes difficult to accomplish because it can be easy to fall into a rut of making your characters too perfect. And when you make your characters too perfect, they're not relatable. They don't feel human. They don't feel like me and you, and therefore we can't relate to and we can't connect with their internal conflict. So how do we make our characters more flawed? We're going to discuss some simple ways in this episode. And there are 5 ways that we want to look at that you can basically instantly give your characters more conflict and make them more flawed, because we all love a flawed character. So we're going to dive into this topic, and we're really excited to get into this discussion. But first, before we get started here, we want to thank our amazing patrons. You're our sponsors of The Kate and Abbie Show, and we're so grateful for your support. So if you get value out of this podcast, go to patreon.com/The Kate and Abbie Show to help us keep this podcast alive and free of interruptions. And when you join the Patreon, you also get access to monthly live stream hangouts with me and Kate, where we kind of take you behind the scenes, show you what we're working on lately, and we get to chat and connect about storytelling. So super fun. We hope to see you over on the Patreon. Okay, let's get into this first way to make your character more flawed and lovable, which you're probably going to guess if you've been on my channel at all or heard me and Katie discussing characters before in the podcast. Number 1 is to give them a misbelief-based fear. And this is something that, I talk about all the time with, the character profile, with giving your character, conflict to make them flawed, is giving them a misbelief first and foremost, and then giving them a fear that is like directly connected to that misbelief, because that's really what makes them an active character in the story. Because like we've talked about before, a plot-driven story, you have just random external events happening to a character, and if they're just a passive character who is being whacked around by the punches of the plot, then they don't have internal conflict, really. Right. They don't have a misbelief-based fear. So, they won't be able to respond to the punches of the plot and be an active participant in the story. Like, that can only happen if they have a misbelief-based fear.
Right, exactly. Because otherwise they're reacting to it how anyone else would react to it, which is something that we've discussed in the past, is that you want your main characters to be unique in how they're responding. Yeah. So if you have a cast of characters, your main character and then a whole slew of sub-characters, and the events of the story are unfolding in such a way that the reader's thinking, well, any of these characters would react the same way that the main character is reacting. We start to question, why is the spotlight even on this main character? Why is this the main character? So what is unique about them? And really what makes someone unique is their belief systems, their own unique set of beliefs that they have accumulated over the course of their life. That's how it is with humans, and that's how it is with characters, if you want your character to feel realistic. Yeah,
so true. And I think that's one of those things that once you have it, once you've established it, the story and the characters kind of like, the characters write the story, sort of, in a way, because they are active participants now who are going after a misbelief-based goal and trying to avoid their fears. And so now, you have this character who's rife with internal conflict and very flawed, because we know that what they believe and hold to be true isn't actually true, but they're going to have a realization at some point in the story where they will realize that it's not true. But until that moment, they are living from their fatal flaw. They're living from that place of, believing this thing about themselves and about the world. And of course, they can have multiple misbeliefs, but I would say if you're not sure where to start, focus on just one. Like, focus on that one misbelief that is going to be the flip side of the theme that you want to share in your story. The truth that you want to scream from the rooftops, as I like to say. Like, what is that truth? And if you turned it upside down and made it a lie, what would it look like for a character to believe that lie?
It's a really good way to look at it.
And how could they come to that realization through the events of the plot in a natural, seamless way?
Right.
Number 2, let their negative traits trip them up. This is something that I think a lot of writers, especially new writers who are, writing characters that they want to be lovable and likable, and they fall into the rut of like making them too perfect. This is where you can go wrong, is by not giving your character enough negative traits, because everybody has positive and negative traits, right? Mm-hmm. Like, everyone has a mixture of both.
Right.
And so when a character doesn't have like any negative traits,
right,
they seem almost like unrealistic.
Right.
Like, nobody's this perfect.
Exactly.
Or their only negative trait is that they're like too much of a perfectionist. It's like,
right,
let's go beyond that. Let's like give them some more realistic negative traits that make them feel really flawed and human, and that can actually like get in their way as they're trying to like pursue this goal.
Right, because you can think of yourself, or think of any person you know, and you can probably quickly think of things that have gotten, times when you've gotten in your own way, right? Yeah. With flaws that you have. Maybe it's, lack of confidence in a certain area, or times that you've worried or doubted or had fears that have kept you from moving forward with something in your life. Those are the natural flaws that make life interesting and make a story interesting. Those are the things that can create building blocks for your character arc. Otherwise, there isn't a character arc. If we're not traveling from one place to another with the character, if we're just staying in the same place, the character starts perfect, they end perfect. Or at least maybe if we're not emphasizing their perfection, we're simply not introducing any flaws that the character has. Mm-hmm. We don't have a character arc at all.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, about negative and positive traits is, like, a lot of times they're the flip side of each other. So, like, you have a character who is, say, like, very outgoing and adventurous and spontaneous and funny and, reckless sometimes. You could find, like, you could say those are all positive things, but then you could take those same traits and flip them upside down and be like, well, they're also, irresponsible and disorganized, and they jump before they think.
Basically, every strength can have a weakness attached.
Yes, exactly. So look at your character's existing strengths and then see, okay, how can they also be weaknesses, and how can they also like trip up the character in moments where they need to overcome that negative trait, and maybe this negative trait will stay with them forever, and it will become a part of their personality, part of their identity, and part of the way that we can then anticipate conflicts that's going to come into this character's path and be like, oh, I know how this character is going to deal with that, knowing their negative traits. That's part of what makes a character feel not only flawed, but lovable and like familiar. Like, like you're best friends with this character. You know exactly how they're going to react in this upcoming conflict because of who they are, what they've already been established to be.
And I don't think it's creating predictability as much as it's creating familiarity.
Yes.
And there should be a sense of familiarity with a character, because that's what makes you care. If you feel like the character is a complete stranger and you have no idea how they're going to respond from one moment to the next, can deflate your story of suspense. It can deflate it of expectation. And there should be a certain amount of not predictability, but expectation to look forward to. Oh, I can't wait to see how they're going to react, because I think this is going to happen. We have to have that relationship, like you're saying.
Yeah.
As if we're friends with this character. And we're thinking, oh, I know what I think's going to happen. They're going to react like this. There has to be that sense.
Yeah. Number 3, give them a secret nobody else knows. This one is kind of fun, and I think it can immediately sort of spice up a dull character or a character that you feel like is missing something, or they just need that extra layer of like something mysterious and unexpected about them, is to give them a secret that nobody else knows, or only maybe one person knows. Or maybe we see the moment when this character divulges this secret to this one other person, which can also create a great trust building moment between characters. But giving them a secret of some kind, it completely depends on the character, depends on where they've been in their past and what experiences they've gone through in life. But finding an opportunity where you can show the reader something about this character that maybe nobody else knows gives you that extra layer of familiarity, like you were just saying, and makes you feel like even closer to the character because now you know something about them that nobody else knows or very few people know. And that like immediately gives you more familiarity, more flaws. It ramps up the conflict a little bit more because it raises the stakes, because now we know there's a consequence to this secret coming out about this character, or somebody else finding out about this thing that they don't want anybody to know. And of course that will be different for every story. Maybe for like a rom-com, it's the secret is that, you know, they're secretly in love with their best friend or their worst enemy. Or maybe for something more like a crime thriller, you have a character who has a secret that they're really a criminal or they've really committed some sort of crime that they want to keep a secret. Right. It really depends on like what story you're writing, but giving your character a colorful past where their flaws and their negative traits have tripped them up in the past, and now there's some event in the past that they want to keep in the past, will immediately give your story and your character that extra layer of juicy conflict.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I really like that in stories when you find out a secret about a character before anybody else knows about it, especially.
Especially when it's being utilized as like that plot twist moment.
Yes.
That can be a really great way to do it, to introduce it as a plot twist.
Yeah, 100%. And number 4 is to allow them to rely on others in moments of crisis. And I think sometimes this one is like counterintuitive because a lot of people want to write, you know, a strong character who can like look after themselves and do everything themselves and they don't need anybody else's help. You see this especially with like the strong female character trope sometimes. And this sometimes just makes the character feel unrealistic because they don't seem human. You know, they seem like too invincible, like to an unrealistic degree. Right. Like, you know, they get hurt in battle, they get stabbed, they get shot, they get wounded. They're just okay. They could just keep going.
Right.
And there's like no consequences. And what it does, it kind of like takes away the stakes from a situation too, when there's like not many consequences of what happens to this character because they're so invincible. They don't need ever to rely on anybody else except themselves. And I think that makes a character feel like less likable too, because we all have to depend on other people in certain situations. And it's nice to see that moment of vulnerability.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. And you can cover that in so many different ways, from romantic relationships to professional relationships, even. Like if you're writing something where it's like, you know, a work scenario, showing that people need other people in order to achieve the greater goal, or teamwork taking place in a sports scenario or something. All the stories that we really love and that we can root for the main character, it's because of how, not just what they want for themselves, but what is it that they're pulling in for themselves that's also affecting other people in a positive way.
Right.
How are they positively affecting the people around them, bringing them into play? And that also is how you make your side characters more lovable too, by involving them in that main plot.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's a great way to introduce or not introduce, but like to use your side characters and bring them into the story in a more meaningful way, is to let them be the characters that your protagonist relies on in a moment of crisis, whether, you know, it's the best friend, the sidekick, the love interest, the mentor, maybe even the villain in a strange scenario. Who knows?
Yeah.
But like that immediately makes your characters more human and flawed and real, and because of that they're more lovable because they have weak moments too. They struggle too. We care about characters not because they are like invincible and superhuman, but because they're human.
Yeah.
And that's something I was sharing in my video where I was discussing and sort of unpicking the timeline of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and how the storytelling is kind of degraded over time because of this departure from, the heart and soul of the story and letting your main character be flawed and have those moments of weakness and vulnerability and rely on others in a moment of crisis. And that can be a great opportunity for your character to learn things too. They can come to new realizations about their own, misbeliefs and their own fatal flaws that they've been holding on to that they need to let go of.
Right. So regardless of what genre you're writing, whether it's fantasy or anything else, contemporary, not focusing so much on superhuman characters, but superhuman characters.
Yes. Super space human.
Right. Super space human.
Exactly.
Because that's what you really want, whether you're writing a paranormal, romance with vampires and werewolves, or if you're writing a contemporary that takes place in a coffee shop, we still need to feel the humanity of the main character. We have to feel those flaws. We have to feel the pitfalls that they're experiencing, because that's what makes the victory taste sweet. That's what makes the character arc have its structure and be able to hold up.
Yes. Yeah, so true. Which kind of leads into the fifth way to make your characters more flawed and lovable, which is to give them an outlet of compassion. Now, this is something that I just recently started like philosophizing over and thinking about in regards to story. And I came to this conclusion through thinking about, strong characters and like the typical cliche of strong characters who are, like I was just saying, invincible, untouchable. They are, they can do everything on their own. Nothing takes them down. And I think that one of the main things that makes a strong character lovable is having an outlet of compassion, having some aspect of their lives, whether it's through a work for the world or for somebody else, where we see that they have a heart and soul and they have empathy for someone, because that really, I think, what makes the difference between a powerful character and a strong character. Because you can have a powerful character who's just like muscling their way through everything, very aggressive, and maybe they're a hero in the story, but they're not really that heroic.
Hero in quotation.
Because they're really not showing much compassion or empathy. They're just kind of aggressively, forcing their way through the plot to try to accomplish their goal. And maybe their goal is just survival. And maybe they've become kind of cynical and bitter and jaded over their past. Okay, you can still have all that, but what is their outlet of compassion that shows me that they're still human at heart? There's like a tiny little flicker of a flame of humanity at their heart, even if they're an anti-hero or, an antagonist or something. Like, that's really what makes the difference. And I was just analyzing that about, books I've read, movies I've watched, where the character is really strong and tough, but still lovable. It's always because they have some outlet of compassion, even if it's just like one person that they show compassion towards, and that they help out in a crisis. And that those few moments of showing this character's like inner empathy can really make you connect with them and see that, they're not just, this cold, bitter person. They may have that outer shell and they may be, cynical and jaded, but they still have a little bit of, humanity and warmth.
Right. Otherwise, the character becomes too engulfed in ego.
Yeah.
They become very ego-driven, because if the story is just about them and about their power, whether it's a superpower or professional power or whatever, it becomes about them so much that it just is an ego-driven. Yeah. Whereas when, like Abbie's saying, if you can shift it to, why are they doing this? Who do they have compassion for? Are they doing it for their family? Are they doing it for their spouse? Are they doing it for a loved one or to make up for something they feel guilty for? Then we start to see the compassion, that extra layer.
Yeah.
That switches it from being ego-driven to being heart-driven.
Yeah, very true. Very well said. I love that. Yeah, and that's something that is a big turnoff for me when I'm reading a book or watching a film and the main character is just like completely ego-driven and they're always just like thinking about how strong and tough and great they are, how invincible they are. It's like it gets so exhausting to watch that character.
Exhausting is a good word for it, yeah.
Because it's like I'm trying to empathize with them, but they don't really show any empathy whatsoever towards anything, so, or anyone. And so it's really hard to connect with the heart of a character who's like, you know, doesn't have any heart whatsoever.
Right.
And you can give, you know, a very bitter, twisted, wicked character a heart. You know, you can give your villain a heart.
Right.
Like we were talking about that recently.
Yeah, we were. Because like if you can show us why does it matter to them what hurt lies in the past that made them do this?
Yeah.
Are they doing it because of their own self-image, because they feel lost, because they feel like they need to belong? What is the reason?
Yeah.
Even with, you know, villains that we're trying to portray as, you know, oh, well, this is just a psycho villain. You know, they have no real reason. They're just doing it because they want to. And there are stories like that works. You know, often like superhero stories will sometimes have that villain that is just doing it because they're pure evil. But there's even a reason behind that. How did that happen? How did they weren't born in that state. So what flipped the switch to get them to that place where they are? So we can really delve into and unpick like the reasons behind these things so that we can find that deeper message. We can find even the flaws and the fears in the villain to make them more, not so much lovable is a weird word to use for the villain or the antagonist, but we can understand and even maybe sometimes relate.
Yeah. Yes. Well said. I like that a lot. Very true. So brainstorm prompts to help you with each of these points and help you to make your characters more flawed and lovable, whether it's the protagonist, the antagonist, or a side character. First, what is the character's greatest misbelief and how does it fuel their present day fear? What are the top 3 negative traits this character has and how do they create conflicts and obstacles in the character's path? Is there a secret this character has been keeping that nobody else knows? If so, what is it and why must it be kept a secret? Who does this character trust? How do they prove their trust in this person by relying on them in a moment of crisis? Who or what is this character's outlet of compassion? How do they prove their humanity and inner strength by showing empathy towards someone or something in their world? So, good brainstorming prompts to get you started and get the creative juices flowing, hopefully, for your own story. Hopefully, you took a lot of notes during this discussion. We would love to hear what you think of all of this. What do you think makes a character instantly more flawed and lovable? Drop a comment below and let us know. We would love to hear from you guys. And the best way to support me and Kate as artists is to buy our books because we are both indie authors and we love to infuse these concepts into our writing and to practice everything that we talk about in this podcast and sort of weave that into our stories, which me and Kate have been doing for several years now. Kate has a 6-book series out that's an urban fantasy. I write cozy contemporaries, and you can find all of our books linked in the description box below this video, so be sure to check those out. Thank you also again to our amazing patrons for supporting the show and keeping it going, keeping it free of interruptions. We love you guys so much. If you get value out of this podcast, go to patreon.com/The Kate and Abbie Show and help us keep this podcast alive and free of interruptions. Until next time,
stay stoked
and rock on.